What if I told you that one decision changed the course of history forever? Today we're diving into the story of the Korean War, also known as the Forgotten War. Hi, I'm Trenton, Donavon, and Glennis, and welcome to Auto History, where we explore the events that shaped our world. In this episode, we'll uncover how the world came dangerously close to nuclear war and what we can learn from it today.
After the end of World War II, the Soviet Army invaded Korea and conquered the 30th Peninsula at the set of the communism government in the north of the line. After the surrender of Japan, the US set up a capitalist government south of the line. Let's start by understanding the Korean War and why tensions were so high in the 1950s. How did the different ideas of communism and capitalism affect what happened during the Korean War? And what can we learn today from this conflict about clashes between different beliefs?
After 5 years of simmering tensions on the Korean Peninsula, the Korean War began on June 25, 1950, when the Northern Korean People's Army invaded South Korea in a coordinated general attack at several strategic points along the 38th parallel, the line dividing communist North Korea from the non-communist Republic of Korea in the south.
The United Nations intervened unexpectedly by the Soviet Union and North Korea, sending armed forces led by the United States. The US did not declare war but instead conducted a police action and sent tens of thousands of troops to support South Korea. This is the biggest deployment of US troops abroad without a declaration of war.
The US victory, while heavily outnumbered by the Chinese, turned the tide of the war. After this war became a bloody stalemate or tie, as neither the US or Chinese force could advance. The series of battles conducted around the Pusan perimeter from August to September 1950 momentarily shifted the war caused in favor of the US-led United Nations Command. On August 1, 1950, the United States 8th Army withdrew east of the Naktang River.
Behind this river, US and South Korean forces established a defense perimeter around the port of Pusan, an important logistical hub on the southeastern tip of the Korean Peninsula. As North Korean pressure built outside the perimeter, the 8th Army Commander Lieutenant General Walton Walker sought a strategy to redirect some of the North Korean forces massing near Daegu, the 8th Army's headquarters.
On August 7, 1950, Task Force Keen conducted a counterattack southwest of the Pusan perimeter. Major General William B. Keen led the task force, which included units from the 25th Infantry Division, the 5th Regimental Combat Team, and the 1st Provisional Marine Brigade. From August 7 to 14, the task force engaged North Korean soldiers near Maesan.
Both sides suffered terrible fatality, including 75 American artillerymen who were seized and ruthlessly killed on August 12 in what became known as the Bloody Gulch Massacre. The bodies of several slain soldiers could not be evacuated when Task Force Keen returned to its original posts. The combat around Masan lasted until the 8th Army broke through the cordon in mid-September.
The successful United Nations landing at Incheon on September 15, 1950 forced North Korean forces to withdraw north and allowed the 8th Army to break out of the Pusan perimeter the next day. The United States defense of the Pusan perimeter had stopped North Korea from capturing the entire peninsula and brought time for reinforcements to arrive. The divisions that held Pusan took heavy casualties, however, and many men lost outside the perimeter were unable to be found when United States and United Nation forces pushed north in September.
After the United Nations forces successfully landed at Incheon and recaptured the South Korean capital city of Seoul, U.S. President Harry Truman applauded General MacArthur's brilliant maneuver and called the general's campaign one of the best military operations in history. After the United Nations advanced to the Yalu River on the Chinese border with North Korea, China entered the war late in October 1950. The Chinese people volunteered about 3 million troops to cross the Yalu River on November 25, 1950.
The initial Chinese decision to join the Korean conflict was based on a misunderstanding of American commitment to help communist growth. They thought Americans would invade China, and their conduct appeared to reflect a desire to avoid confrontation. The withdrawal of U.S. force as well as South Korean armies' meager equipment and training suggested that Washington was unconcerned about Korea's future.
As a result, Mayo accepted North Korea's plan for military reunification. China sought to earn worldwide status as well as low-cost access to Soviet weaponry and training. The Korean War stalemate at the 38th parallel refers to the demilitarized zone known as DMZ, created by pulling back the respective force 1.2 miles along each side of the boundary. It runs about 150 miles across the peninsula, from the mouth of the Han River on the west coast to a little south of the North Korean town of Kosong on the east coast.
Located within the DMZ is the truce village of Panmunjom, about 5 miles east of the Kaesong. It was the site of peace discussions during the Korean War and has since been the location of various conferences over issues related to North and South Korea, their allies, and the United Nations.
The armistice negotiation was signed by the United States Army Lieutenant General William Harrison Jr. and General Mark W. Clark represented the United Nations Command. North Korea leader Kim Il-sung and General Nam-il represented the Korean People's Army, and Peng De-he represented the Chinese People's Volunteer Army, thus ending 3 years of warfare in 1953. The Korean Armistice Agreement is unique because, despite being signed by military commanders, it was formally ratified by the United Nations General Assembly on August 28, 1953. This was not a peace treaty, it merely stopped the fighting. The war is technically still happening till this day.
The Korean War brought damages to both Korea. In spite of damages to North Korea are estimated to be a lot bigger than those in South Korea. Well, for various reasons, the South Korean agricultural sector was very poor through the farmland to improve in times of war. North Korea built up a collective farming system through virtual nationalization of farmland, which lowered productivity for different reasons. South Korea ignored an industry focused on producing things in favor of promoting large businesses and consumer goods oriented industrial structures.
North Korea disregarded the production of everyday essentials in favor of developing an industrial framework focused on heavy industry. The Korean War damaged two major economic reforms, and by that means they made the Korean economic structure distorted and foreign dependent. The most serious consequences of the war is the consolidation of division, antagonistic confrontation, and acceleration of the diverse societies in a nation, making probable unification costs astronomically high.
So going over the facts again. The Korean War began on June 25, 1950, when some 75,000 soldiers from the North Korean People Army poured across the 38th parallel, the boundaries between the Soviet-backed and the Democratic People Republic of Korea to the north and the pro-West Republic to the south. This invasion was the first military action of the Cold War. By July, the American troops had entered the war on behalf of South Korea. As far as the American officials were concerned, it was a war against the force of international communism itself.
After some early back and forth across the parallel, the fighting stalled and casualties mounted with nothing to show for them. Meanwhile, the American official worked anxiously to fashion some sort of armistice with the North Koreans. The alternative they feared would be a wider war with Russia or China, or even, as some warned, World War III. And finally, in July 1953, the Korean War had come to an end.
The importance of the Korean War is the armistice agreement that was signed on July 27, 1953 and continued to be in effect since. Both sides have given up trying to unify Korea by force, and the movement of armies on the ground had never again matched the fury of the war's first year, leading to tens of thousands of lives lost in a bloody stalemate similar to the First World War.
The Korean War was relatively short but expectationally bloody. Nearly 5 million people died. More than half of these, about 10% of Korea's pre-war population, are civilians. This rate of civilian casualties was higher than World War II and Vietnam's war. Almost 40,000 Americans were in action during the Korean War, and more than 100,000 were wounded. Today, the Korean War split is felt mostly with the development of the North Korean weapons program. This started in December 1952 with the Atomic Energy Research Institute and the Academy of Sciences. In February 1956, Pyongyang signed the founding charter for the Soviet Union's nuclear research. North Korea and the Soviet Union signed an agreement on the peaceful use of nuclear energy in 1959. After China's first nuclear test in 1964, Kim Il-sung requested for nuclear technology, but they then refused the request. By the early 1970s, North Korean engineers had purchased plutonium reprocessing equipment from the USSR and used domestic technology to expand the IRT-2000 reactor. In October 2008, North Korea shocked the international community when it carried out its first nuclear test. Today, North Korea has about 50 nuclear weapons. They alternate periods of hostility and testing with periods of negotiation where they seem to agree to stop missile and weapons tests and reduce their arsenal, but they have so far always broken every deal they've signed about nuclear weapons and gone back to building more, leaving the Korean Peninsula as a constant danger to world stability.
Thanks for joining me on Auto History. Don't forget to tune in next time for another dive into the past. Until next time.